Hello and welcome to It's All Kicking Off, another football roundtable discussion podcast with myself, Adam Wilbourn, and Adam Nicholas from WhatCulture Football, here to discuss another burning football issue. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Football on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily football podcasts. As I said, though, joined by Adam Nicholas to talk about Andrea Pirlo being new Juventus manager. Nicholas, you and I are two of the biggest fans of Pirlo here in Newcastle. First of all, what did you make to the news that he's been upgraded very quickly from under-23 manager to manager of Juventus to replace Maurizio Sarri?
Well, this was a delightful little piece of news, wasn't it, to stumble across on Saturday. I believe we may have even been celebrating your birthday at the time. Who knows? I wouldn't want to spread more news. You'll have to wait till the next little bit of football news we give you tomorrow. But yes, fascinating this. I genuinely felt like this was something I've dreamt up in the past. The picture of Pirlo by the Juve logo in the suit as the manager. But here he is. Obviously, Sarri getting sacked. Probably the inevitable thing we know, because Juventus have been chasing that the Champions League for so long now to try and get it back in their possession, and have not really had much luck with it. Sarri obviously brought on for that. The league was no problem pretty much for him, but unfortunately Champions League didn't land. So they brought in the real footballing genius, David Moyes. Take a seat, because Andrea Pirlo is here. I honestly can't tell you how much I want this to work out, because I have seen many players or pundits who I've enjoyed in the past become managers, and it did not go well.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, isn't it? I think people will point to the likes of Guardiola and Zidane and say, look, ex-players can go on and really do great things, and they forget that there are many, many other examples where that did not happen. And I believe I read somewhere, I can't remember who it was off the top of my head. Well, Gattuso has not exactly welcomed Pirlo in with open arms, but someone else said an alien like Pirlo on the pitch doesn't necessarily translate to being a great manager. We'll get into that in due course. In terms of Sarri, though, it wasn't really just the lack of a Champions League either, was it? It was the lack of success domestically. Yes, granted, as you say, they won the Serie A, the Italian National League, but they failed in the cup competitions. And by most reports, obviously, Ronaldo wasn't happy, which is always a sign of things are probably going to come to an end soon. And it wasn't the style of football, or the way that they won games wasn't necessarily the right way for management, upper management, this is, of Juventus, or the fans.
Yeah, that's obviously a very high standard when you're Juventus manager, because, as we say, the league at the moment, the way Serie A is, tends to be a given. Now there are teams who are getting closer every year, but for the reasonable last however long, Juventus have been the champs, and for good reason, because they've been the best side. But that's your bare minimum, isn't it? To win the league is your bare minimum. So no domestic cup, no Champions League. You're thinking, well, this is not really the kind of standard they aspire to. Sarri was always an interesting appointment as well, I thought, because given his history, particularly obviously his stint at Chelsea, where he struggled to manage that group of players and struggled to get the respect from that group of players, in particular some of the more mature heads, but also some of the guys who you would have actually maybe thought like were his signings and would have actually listened to him, didn't. And this is always going to be an interesting case. It hasn't quite worked out from the way he wanted. Ronaldo is, again, a fantastic player, but also, as you can imagine, an ego that you have to manage quite carefully to make sure you're getting the best out of it for both the player and the team. And if anything, that's probably one of the biggest tasks you're going to get if you are indeed the manager of a team where Cristiano Ronaldo is at, because you want to do it the right way, but you also have to do it in a way that sort of keeps him happy, because an unhappy Cristiano Ronaldo is not a Ronaldo that you want at your club at all.
We talked about Ronaldo in the news this morning around links with him and PSG. Do you think, as we suggested, that bringing Pirlo in won't just change the fortunes of Juventus on the European club scene, but also in terms of perhaps convincing their star man to stay for at least one more season?
You'd like to hope so, wouldn't you? I mean, if I'm a footballer and you get to work with a multitude of different managers, Ronaldo's probably seen quite a few in his time, both obviously not so much at Man United, but definitely at Real Madrid. And I just think this is an interesting project. If I'm a player there now and Pirlo comes in, I'm thinking this is interesting, because this is a man who is a footballing man through and through. This is the guy who akin to what a Xavi or an Iniesta would be at Barcelona. These people care about football. Like, they want to play good football and they want to play simple football that the fans are going to enjoy. Pirlo understands Juventus is a club far better than most of the people you're going to bring in to come and manage that club. And I think it tells you a lot that this is a guy who, before this, was obviously heavily associated with AC Milan, would genuinely consider Juventus to be more his home than it would in Milan, despite all the successes he had there as well. So this is a club he loves. This is a club he would love to certainly take as a manager and take them forward. And I think we're going to talk about it shortly, but the kind of signings that he's already looking to bring in strike me like this is for the club and manager, they're thinking long term.
Yes, it's a big gamble. I have to say this for both Pirlo and Juventus. For Pirlo, if he fails, I mean, where does he go from here as a manager? I mean, I don't think there's going to be a shortage of offers, but you're never really going to get this sort of opportunity again. And for Juventus, I mean, the names that were being linked with Juve, Maurizio Pochettino, even someone like Pep Guardiola, who's never really, done anything in Italy in terms of management. Of course, he's kind of conquered every other European league except for Serie A. It's a big gamble, but in terms of pressure, I think Pirlo, for anyone who watched him against England in penalty shootouts, will know it's something he probably can handle, at least when he's in control.
Andrea Pirlo's famous quote, I'm going to have to paraphrase because I can't remember the exact wording off the top of my head, but he says that he doesn't feel pressure. This is the man who, in his autobiography, said he doesn't feel it. The night before the World Cup, he spent the day basically playing FIFA on his PlayStation, and then he said, and then I just went to play the match, and we won the World Cup. Like, this is a guy who doesn't feel pressure. This is a guy who understands the game better than anybody, has a brilliant brain for the game. I absolutely agree, by the way, with the likes of Conte and Gattuso, who've already spoken about and said, this isn't just a guarantee. It's not necessarily that just because he was a great player, immediately becomes a great manager. I just feel like an understanding of the game to that degree, and hopefully the players and the club's sort of ethos that he has, is something that he can bring that maybe not a lot of the other managers have, despite the fact they've got better 10 years as manager than he does. But I mean, if you're going to get someone who might be able to instill that sort of complete lack of pressure feeling into the players as well, and maybe get them playing in that way, this is the man I'd want to bring in, I think.
On the other hand, it's an easier start because he's not going to completely rehabilitate Juventus. I believe they've won the Serie A title for nearly a decade straight, it seems. There are issues with that Juve squad, though. I don't think he's going to struggle scoring goals. And certainly in terms of like centre halves, he isn't in trouble either. But what does he need to change at Juve?
I think he's already highlighted himself, and ironic, obviously, because he was in those boots, is that the midfield seems to be the area where they perhaps need a fresh lick of paint. Like you say, the attack speaks for itself. I mean, crikey, if any team would be happy to have half of the strike force that Juventus has got. The one thing I would say is, obviously, defensively, they've got some brilliant players there, but typically, as is with the way of Italian football, the back four, they're of a certain age, aren't they? So, like, they're a great unit, and they always have been for many, many years at Juventus. But there's definitely going to be a point where that's going to need to be addressed. And you don't want them all disappearing at the very same time, which would be a concern. But I think the midfield seems to be the area he wants to add to, and maybe bring in just a bit more of the kind of the feel, and as you said before, the style of play that they want to be playing at Juventus. They need those good footballing midfielders to link the play up to the front guys, and I think maybe that's what they've slightly been lacking, if indeed anything. Although, it's a good again this is a good team, but it's a hard bar to try and meet because you are Juventus. You have to win the league, and after that, everything else is considered to be a job well done, I guess. But it's odd, isn't it?
Before we get on to signings, just talking about the squad that he's inherited, you obviously allude to Chiellini, Bonucci. I mean, if you're ever going to have defenders learn from other central defenders, I mean, you couldn't really get any better than those two. I mean, I think it's fair. Some English pundits roll their eyes or question someone like a style of Chiellini, but it's effective. And, having someone like De Ligt from Ajax, who of course came in. I believe they've got a Turkish defender, Demiral, who is learning from them as well. It's a brilliant example. We obviously learned recently that Pjanic is heading to Barcelona in a sort of transfer/swap deal with Arthur. And I know that Pirlo has said in the past that he's a big fan, for obvious reasons, of a 4-3-3 formation, which could really play into his hands with the players that he's got right now.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's the kind of, forward style that maybe you'd want to see Juventus playing, free flowing. It's interesting, I find that, because in a lot of the teams I think he's played in previously, it's been a 4-4-2, isn't it? Like he's always been like the sort of quarterback of that little diamond, and then you've had the two up top. But the game has changed so dramatically that if you maybe just want to, it's probably going to be similar shape, but more that fourth point of the diamond is just pushed further up towards the attack. But you're right. I mean, in terms of the likes of Chiellini and Bonucci you mentioned there, like these guys they're going to respond well probably to a player who they have played with. They understand him. They probably know him quite well as a player. And much like we've seen with Frank Lampard at Chelsea, like we've seen with Arteta at Arsenal, the recipe's there for this to be good and for him to get the best out of it. And you'd hope that would impact the team across the board.
Yeah, we talk about this seemingly more and more. I don't know what the tipping point was, but you've seen it with, as you mentioned, those teams there. You've got it obviously in spades at Liverpool. I feel like Guardiola's trying to reinstill this in the City side since they've sort of lost their way. But it's this togetherness of squad, and having someone like you say who's been in that changing room relatively recently will really help them.
Yeah, I think so. And well, I certainly hope so. Put it that way. I mean, it's not like, again, we say help them. It's not like Juventus have struggled hugely. Like this is a team who continue to win the league. But if they're going to get that next level, they need someone who's been. I mean, you want to talk about experience. You're talking to a guy who was in an AC Milan team who was 3-0 up against Liverpool and they lost. So if you can instill that mentality into players of the games aren't done until they're done, and similarly, he's obviously got the wonderful story of AC Milan coming back and eventually winning that. Winning the revenge game against Liverpool, if you will. So they remember what that felt like, and he definitely will remember how to sort of gauge the big pressure that comes with that night, even though, again, he doesn't feel pressure, but you know what I mean, for his other players and instilling that kind of mentality in them. It's a winning mentality. In Europe, that's the thing, and Juventus have always been considered to be one of the biggest clubs. But in recent years, we had the final against, I want to say, Barcelona or Real Madrid. It was Real Madrid. And where Mandzukic scored that incredible goal. That's right, against Real Madrid, because it was Gareth Bale, wasn't it? But that's the kind of caliber you want to see Juve in every year. That's where I feel like they should be, like at least in the semis or in the final of that competition. Across Europe, if they're going to be considered a big team again, that's where it needs to happen. And you can tell that the guys who are running the club are very much in that camp. They want to see that return. Juventus, the old lady, being the huge force that they have been considered in past years.
We can but dream. I mentioned Arthur, obviously, coming in from Barcelona. We've got Dejan Kulusevski, who's also going to be arriving. In terms of other signings and those I've just mentioned there, who were the names you're thinking of?
Well, I'm going to have to cheat on it because we've already technically done the news about this. But I love the idea of the guys who Pirlo is already looking at in terms of bringing those midfielders in to bring the next generation, the next step, if you will, to this Juventus team. He's looking at Sandro Tonali from Brescia, which, again, for people who weren't watching the news this morning, Pirlo has already kind of said that he thinks this guy is a better player than him, a more complete footballer than Andrea Pirlo. So just not that I'm trying to overhype this, and my apologies, Tonali, if you do end up there and it's all too much for you, but that is quite a tag from a man who's obviously a keen admirer of Tonali's. And also on top of that, you've got Nicola Zaniolo from Roma, who has been in and around the team, and he's certainly provided the kind of enough for you to see there's potential there. Both these players have got huge upsides if they can get the right team to be involved in and get the right amount of games. I mean, you look at a team like that Liverpool side that Jurgen Klopp has made. Yes, he brought a lot of younger players in. Same with his Dortmund side, but he knows how to bring them into the team, give them enough time so they progress, and eventually he's got this new squad of brilliant players. That might be the kind of thing we're looking for at Juventus. And this seems like that kind of move to me. This seems like not a hard reset because there's going to be old ways in terms of the likes of Chiellini and Bonucci, like you mentioned, can bring that old stability. But even the likes of De Ligt, who are going to be there now, that's the next generation. If indeed they do manage to get Tonali and Zaniolo and others of a similar ilk, that feels to me like the next crop that are coming through.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a complete overhaul of this squad, does it? It's not. I'm sure he may well make 5 or 6 signings, but you only need, I'd say, maybe 2 or 3 to really round out that side. Fullbacks is another area that questions have been asked, and I know they've been sort of trying to work with the likes of Alexandro and Cuadrado in a sort of wing back position. Is that a feasible strategy for you in the Champions League?
think we see a lot of teams playing this, don't we? This three at the back with the wing backs either side. Cuadrado and Sandro are very good players. There's no question about it. But they are certainly Cuadrado as well, starting to feel like they're heading towards the other end of their career, shall we say? And I don't know. It's quite hard. You see a team like that Liverpool side who've got their wing backs like so young. You're going to get years out of both Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson, those guys, and they've got the system down to a T. It all depends on how Pirlo wants to play, really, doesn't it? Because if he does indeed end up changing to that 4-3-3 instead of the wing backs that you might want to mention there, then where does that leave these guys? Are they more accustomed to playing that system, or would they just happily set in the back four? I guess you'd have to wait and find out, wouldn't you?
One name I have to talk about, it's the name that everyone is speculating around, is Paul Pogba. Of course, the name that will not go away. How feasible do you see his return to Juventus being? Because it feels like, at least until this has come back around, that all the talk of him leaving Manchester United had kind of gone away for a bit.
Yeah, I think why that is important, because I think, interestingly, when he was at Juventus, a lot of people said he was an absolute star when he was at Juventus, playing some wonderful football. But who was he playing alongside? Adam Wilbourn. Who was the guy who was helping him out in that department? It was one Andrea Pirlo, who was finding the way to unlock the potential in Paul Pogba and gave him the chance to be the player we've seen. And now over at Manchester United, who's the player in there? Bruno Fernandes has come in and allowed Pogba to kind of open himself up a bit and be a bit looser. He hasn't quite reached those heights yet, but he's definitely been better since playing with Fernandes. This is a guy who obviously needs to be playing with the right players to get the best out of him. So would that be a delicious story? Paul Pogba leaving Man United to go to Juventus, to then leave Juventus to go to Man United, to then leave Man United to go back to Juventus and reunite with Andrea Pirlo. I mean, this feels like I'm playing PES and we're in the Master League now and people are just going back and forward to each other on the transfers. But I would take it. In terms of a narrative, it would be fantastic. But again, where does that leave the potential other young signings if you're going to get such an influx of midfielders all in one go? You kind of think there needs to be a balance, doesn't there?
I'd say at a bare minimum, there's been an eyes emoji being sent in the WhatsApp chat between Pirlo and Pogba.
Definitely. At least a text saying, I
don't know whether I can see it or not. I mean, like, we talk about Cuadrado and Alexandro, and they've got other players there like Douglas Costa, for example, and I look at them and I'm completely biased because of my FIFA connections, and I go, well, they're great. They've got like some ridiculous pace.
Really high ratings.
Yeah, I need to watch more week in, week out Serie A action, I think, before I can make a final decision on that sort of thing. But let's bring it back to the central point that we sort of started off with when it comes to Juventus and the sacking of Sarri and the Pirlo arrival, or upgrade, should we say, from, I think it was only like a week ago he got given the under-23 manager's job. So
crazy, isn't it?
It's mad. But can he help them win the Champions League? I mean, you look at this season, we talk about Man City and certainly Bayern Munich after their result against Chelsea the other day looking like potential favourites, along with Atletico Madrid, etc., etc. But yeah, obviously Juve got knocked out over the weekend against Lyon. But you still would have to consider them for next season one of the big contenders.
I mean, every season, I think, is where they'd want to aim to be the big contenders, as we've mentioned already. But can Pirlo bring it back? Well, he has a very simple answer to that question, Mr. Wilbourn. No Pirlo, no party. So if indeed Pirlo is there, then what are we going to have here? We're going to have a party, aren't we? Which means the only way you're going to get that party is if you're going to win the goddamn Champions League. Which, if you want, look, it's hard to say. I am, of course, just excited. I'm very excited that Pirlo is going to be the manager. This could go disastrously wrong. Genuinely could be like a real big flop. You hope not. But I think if he can get the right moves made in the transfer market, then that is a guy who understands how that competition works, how to manage those players, whether they be players he used to play with or bring them to new guys. And I'd love to see it. I really would. I have waited. And if he can somehow keep Gianluigi Buffon around long enough for this, just give him enough games in the Champions League or have him as part of that squad so he gets a winner's medal if indeed they could win it next season. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. I think we'll keep Ronaldo as one. Getting those signings in is the other one, and finding the right way to play, which is obviously something I feel like he will be able to do. Then let's talk again after that happens and see what their prospects are actually like. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, a bit like if you look at it next season, I don't think there's any standout contenders, because I think, yes, you'll look around and say, well, Liverpool and Manchester City obviously have to be considered. And Man City may well even win it this season, but you kind of put them to one side because you think, well, they're going to be battling it out on all fronts in England as well, League, Cup, etc. Bayern Munich, I think, are always in and around that sort of thing, and they looked sensational. However, it'll be another year for the likes of Muller and Lewandowski, and obviously they're constantly evolving that squad. But I'd say on paper, Juventus have one of the strongest sides to compete in the Champions League. And yes, obviously, like we said, they've experienced more competition in Serie A. They've got Lazio, they've got the Milans, they've got my beloved Roma to potentially contend with. Long history with them in Football Manager. But if they could, for example, get Serie A kind of wrapped up, we don't know how the season's going to go next year, but let's say, by early 2021, if they can kind of see the route that they need to take to finish that off and maybe get an Italian Cup in there as well, I'd have to say I wouldn't bet against them, for example, in a big game now. If you'd have given me Juventus, Barcelona, for example, in previous seasons, I'd have said probably given the edge to Barcelona just because of legacy and what have you. And I just think, yes, Barcelona have got sensational players. They've still got, Messi, Ronaldo is going to be the age-old argument that we could talk about and fill thumbnails for years still. But I just think in terms of man management, I should say, I think it's going to be fascinating to see what Pirlo does. And at least in a sort of fairy tale story kind of way, I would be ecstatic to see the old lady back winning the Champions League.
You just would. You'd love to see it. I just feel like there's also that inevitable curse feeling with the Champions League at the minute when it comes to Juventus. It's the thing that's eluded them for quite some time now, even at the point where you've seen them in finals. Buffon has been so close, man. He was in the final and lost in a final, I think multiple times now at this point. Like, it's just, if not for him, just for the narrative of the club. And I'm a sucker for a story. I've always been a sucker for a good story. And what a great story it would be for Andrea Pirlo to turn this into a European recognised side that can actually be one of the best, if not the best team in the world. But there's a massive mountain to climb. Let's not just make it out like that's going to be easy. As you mentioned, those teams are all there for reasons that are undeniable, it's fair to say. But we can dream. We can goddamn dream. And that's what we're going to do.
And question marks may well be raised about Pirlo's management style or what his experience or whatever. But the one thing that is certain, in the words of Jay from Men in Black, what is the difference between Maurizio Sarri and Andrea Pirlo? He makes this look good. Oh, I'm excited for next season already.
Wonderful stuff.
Do let us know your thoughts on this in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Football, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily football podcasts, of course. You can also let us know your thoughts on Twitter at WhatCultureFC and watch there. Follow both of us. You can follow Adam Nicholas at...
It's Adam Nicholas. And you can follow this lovely man, Adam Wilbourn, at...
Adam Wilbourn. Follow us all, as I said, at WhatCultureFC. We can dream. We can dream, Nicholas. This has been It's All Kicking Off. My thanks, Adam and Nicholas. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you soon.